Today, we are going to be reacting to Charlie Kirk doing what he does best, debating and dunking on Gen Z liberals.
Thank you.
Charlie, you've stated that you're not into criminalizing the mother for an abortion. Why is that? Like, how can we make a law that has no consequences?
Well, there's two parts of this, right? The first of which is no person should advocate for retroactive enforcement of something that was once legal to then make illegal. We can agree with that, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I would agree if tomorrow they made abortion illegal, we could not put people in jail that have already had them. You can't punish people for a law a new law that did not exist 10 years ago. So I would agree.
No matter what the law is, you cannot claw back. For example, if all of a sudden the government says you can't have a public assembly like this and that is effective tomorrow, they can't go back today and put us all in prison, right? So that's number one, retroactive. Number two, my heart goes out to women that have abortions.
Right.
Because they're lied to and manipulated. And it's based.
So again, this is the same thing that we've talked about before. It's always the women didn't know. Plausible deniability lets us get away with, in this case, murder. They're always going to default to the woman does not know better because he has more of a blue-pilled mindset. So when men are more blue-pilled, they tend to view women as innocent. They just don't know any better. And they always give women the benefit of the doubt. So these are the guys that have a tendency to marry women with a promiscuous past because they always give women the benefit of the doubt.
On one very simple medical principle, the lack of informed consent. I do not believe women, largely when they get abortions, know what they're doing. They're not given ultrasound.
So this is not true. I have shown women abortion videos and they do not care. Occasionally, you may get one that I would argue pretends to care after the fact. But I look at actions, I don't look at words. And I think one of men's greatest weaknesses is they always fall for women crying. Myron has a saying where he says that a woman's only true tears are the ones that she cries in private. I agree with this. I don't really buy the women that come on these shows and say they really regret these abortions because I believe if they were put in that position again, they would still do the same thing because biologically, women do not want to pass on genes that they believe are subpar. This is evolution. This is how it's always been. I don't think it's right. I'm pro-life. If it was up to me, it would be illegal and the women would be thrown in jail, but it's not. And I don't see this issue going away anytime soon.
Sounds for their baby. They're not informed of the gruesome and graphic details surrounding their procedure. Instead, the justice system should be focused on the abortionists that are actually doing that procedure.
And who are the abortionists? It's the men. So whenever there is a choice where we can blame women or blame men, we have a tendency as a society to blame the men. Like if we say, I'll give you another example. When we say the marriage rates are declining, and we want to look at who is in charge of marriage? Whose choice is that? Why are marriage rates not declining? Now, the initial reaction is to blame the men. Well, men don't want to get married anymore. But if we look at the average age of first marriage is 31. Men hit their peak around 35, and sometimes if they stay in shape, it goes higher and higher. That indicates that it's actually the women that are delaying marriage because when we have the most choice, we're not picking it. So even in that case, they still blame the men when the men are actually cashing out sooner than the women. In most cases, women are the gatekeepers of marriage because so many men are being excluded from the sexual marketplace. Okay, but that's just another example where we're blaming the men for something that women are doing. When 1 out of 3 women are getting an abortion, now I don't know, when 1 out of 3 women are getting an abortion, that's far more a woman's choice, right? And women say that it's a woman's choice. Men shouldn't have an opinion. They agree, right? But yet, when we get to the conservative commentators, they still find a way to blame it on the men. And personally, I think that's wrong. If I hire a hitman, just because he pulled the trigger, I still know what I'm doing when I hire the hitman. And if I don't, I can Google it. And I am still responsible and if anything, I would argue more responsible because the hitman is just doing a job where that person is putting a hit on somebody. So
Does that make sense?
I mean, I guess, but the person also committing the crime, like killing her baby, I feel like should also be held responsible.
And I like that. I like that women are starting to wake up. We don't need, and I don't know if he's doing this because he's trying to appeal to female voters. And he's in a tough position because his audience, he can never come out as pro-choice. His audience is way too conservative. That would go against his base. But he has to have been in politics long enough to know that the abortion issue will never change. There's no way that you can go and be in politics for 10 years. And I know maybe to the average person, this seems immoral, right? But what I would say is when you're in a position where you're negotiating with people, you have to think about what is realistic and what is unrealistic. And what I would say is that getting abortion banned, I could, if I wanted to, do a tirade about how wrong and immoral abortion is. And while I would agree that would be ineffective because Roe versus Wade is here to stay, if 1 out of 3 women are getting abortions and women are the biggest swing voters, your chance of that going away is 0. What a more effective policy to reduce abortion would be, I would argue, is getting rid of child support and letting men opt out of fatherhood the way that women are able to opt out of motherhood. Because if you increase the consequences for casual sex, and you actually hold women responsible for their decisions, you may see a decrease in the irresponsible behavior. But what conservatives, and this is why I always try to say conservatives do the same thing liberals do, because they keep handing women get out of jail free cards. And what's interesting is if you ask conservatives about homeless men, they never give them a get out of jail free card. They will do a whole tirade about how the men need to get a job. They'll do a whole tirade about how the men need to step up. If we hear that there aren't enough marriageable men, what do the conservatives say? The men just need to do better. Well, why is it always the men? And that's what I call it the what about the men though syndrome, where if you say anything about women, if we say, hey, maybe if abortion's murder, we should hold the women that are committing a crime responsible. They say, no, that's the doctor's fault. And so I can't really, when you treat us like children, and you can see this woman, she's kind of waking up where she's thinking, no, I'm an adult. We can make our decisions. We know what we're doing. And once you wake up to this epidemic of simping, it's an epidemic, guys, where let's give us get out of jail free cards and then throw our hands up and we can't believe the way that we're acting. Well, of course, when you give women plausible deniability every chance you get, where if we get an abortion, we just didn't know. Like sometimes I wonder, do you guys go to these pro-choice marches where the women are arguing for abortions? They have the babies there. And you see the pro-life people showing them the videos. They don't care. And it is what it is, you know.
Like, how can we ban abortions and the mom just still be let go?
Is that a lot? Like, it's like he does not compute. She's like, no, I think women are responsible for their decisions, just like men are responsible for their decisions. Does not compute. Does not compute.
Yeah, we're just not going to agree. I just don't. First of all, she's not doing the act. Many times she's being forced into that situation by someone paying for that abortion, such as someone that she might have had a relationship with, or even terrible pimps also do it as well. But we're not going to agree because I think
Captain Save-A-Ho. Captain Save-A-Ho, the pimps. As we talked about, class, remember, I've interviewed tons of sex workers. They don't do it because they're forced into it. They don't do it for money. The average OnlyFans model makes about either $150 or $200 a month. So if we're going to ask the question based on the stats and say, Are women doing sex work for money? The answer would be no, because we have up to, and this is disputed, but I've seen numbers 1 out of 10 to 1 out of 5 women under the age of 35 doing some sort of sex work. And at the end of it, you find out there's not even money. That would indicate that they do it, or we do it, for something other than money. And this is the reality I'm trying to bring back to America, because I get very frustrated when I watch these debates, because facts don't care about your feelings according to the right until the facts go against the go against the women are wonderful and awesome and amazing syndrome at all times.
Our posture on abortion should be compassion for the women that have abortions and get abortions, and justice.
Can we imagine if we said, Charlie, could you see him saying this? Let's talk about a men's issue. So a men's issue is homelessness. Charlie, don't you think we should have compassion for the men that are on the streets that are homeless? No, the conservatives say get a job. And what they don't know is, so I interviewed a man named Terrence Pop, and he is out of Michigan, and he went homeless. He was an ex-military veteran, and he served in Iraq. I think he did 3 tours. He did combat tours, but he's like a badass. He did a lot of stuff in the military. And he actually became homeless because he was put on such high child support. And the issue with military men is because they're gone so much of the year, their custody is automatically given to the woman. And what he found was when he would go to these homeless shelters, he would say, according to him, right, take this or leave it, I want to say it was 7 to 8 out of 10 of the homeless men at those shelters had just given up on life because they were put on such absurd amounts of child support that they just couldn't keep up with it. And yet conservatives will still talk about the deadbeat dad issue. But when I did my interviews, what I found out is most deadbeat dads are deadbeat moms, because they kicked the dad out of the home, they put him on exorbitant amounts of child support, and in some cases it's 70 to 80% of their income. And they never have compassion ever for those men. When you say, well, the woman went and divorced him, what's their answer? It's, well, why did she divorce? He must not have been a good enough Christian. Well, I interviewed one guy who he went to Latin Mass, Catholic Mass, and as far as I could tell, didn't do drugs, didn't commit crimes. And it was one of the most horrific divorce stories I'd ever heard. And this was a devout Catholic man. And I kept finding this. I found a pastor who had 8 children whose wife did the same thing. And I kept thinking, well, what, you want him to be more close to God than a pastor? Like, what more do you guys want? But there's never, ever, ever compassion for men's issues. It's always, whenever we do something wrong, it's always somehow the men's fault. And I'm to the point I'm getting sick of it. I don't like being pandered to. I don't like the simping. And I don't like treating us like children. We're adults. And as an adult, you are responsible for the decisions you make, good or bad. So the more we have conservatives just pandering and simping and just giving us a get out of jail free card, I find it offensive. I don't understand why more women aren't offended by this. If you're a woman and you haven't done these things, right? If you've never gotten an abortion, you know that the women that get abortions know what they're doing. You know that most of the time, every woman I know personally that's gotten an abortion was irresponsible. Every single one was dating the guy. Every single one had a family she could have gone back to that totally would have helped her. But the women did not deem that man's genes as worthy of passing on. And that is biological. That's biology. I'm not saying you have to be, what did they say, a slave to your biology, right? I'm not saying just because your biology says you should do it. But what I am saying is they know what they're doing. And you are no better than the liberals if you give women a get out of jail free card 24/7.